The whole purpose of technology is really to solve these inefficiencies. I'm constantly on the lookout for some kind of inefficiency. There's never a perfect model, there's never a perfect company. There's always going to be kind of opportunity loss. And so my task is to find it and see if we can actually address it and hopefully solve it, and, to minimize as many inefficiencies as we can. The freedom of scaling these companies and exiting, you learn more every time. And so what you think was a genius idea, when you hand off that company, the person who's purchasing that can't comprehend it or needs your level of understanding to operate it, you're not really out. You're still working in that company, that business.
Hi, my name is Demetri Panici, and I'm a content creator, agency owner, and AI enthusiast. You're listening to the AI Agents Podcast, brought to you by Jotform, and featuring our very own CEO and founder, Ida Tank. This is the show where artificial intelligence meets innovation, productivity, and the tools shaping the future of work. Enjoy the show. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the AI Agents Podcast. Here we have Chris Wise from Wise Capital. How are you doing, Chris?
Doing well. Thank you for having me.
So I'm really excited to chat with you on this one because we've had a lot of people talk about AI and their products, but what is really interesting to me, and I do talk a lot about on this podcast, is essentially how people like myself as business owners are able to save time and not have to hire as much through building out AI agents and automation workflows. So I'm really excited to chat through your journey because that's pretty much the focus of what we're going to go through in this episode. Give us a little bit of a rundown of how you got to where you're at Wise Capital, and what necessarily got you into what you're doing to save so much time and money on employment with this, string of different workflows that you've put together.
Yeah, absolutely. So, it started for me with a law firm. I started a law firm back in 2020. And as I scaled that firm, a big portion of evaluating how to scale, frankly, as fast as we could, but in a way that made sense as well, both from a business perspective and a financial perspective, was looking at, different automations, and specifically, conversational AI. And so for us, it started, or for me rather, it started with looking into really what conversational AI was, how is it developed, how is it programmed, how do you get to that scale? And that was back in 2020, 2021 when I first started that. And that was not a time that it was heavily talked about, frankly. Some people kind of knew, but yeah, it just wasn't widely known as it is today. And so as we scaled that, I say we, just the team I've built over there at Wise and Associates, the law firm. Uh, I wanted to find a way. If you don't know, lawyers are probably one of the worst sales people out there in the world. And so I wanted to get them, exposure to a different avenue where somebody can, or a program can, take over the sales side, the invoicing side, um, the marketing side, retargeting with ads, all that. And so that led me down the path of this conversational AI. And so as we were starting to play with it, and there's long stories about how I got started, frankly, buying books, reading, trying to comprehend how that works, and then building small little tools, and just goofball games to get the experience. And then with that, learn that you can build these machine learned programs and AI tools fairly quickly. And so, from there, I started a marketing and sales agency, exited that, then started Wise Capital, which is why we're here today, on the property tech space. And that is a property tech company. We have a lot of different AI tools that we've built, from evaluating properties to maintenance predictive models, all the way to conversational AI that really takes the place of the property manager, not 100%, but probably 70 to 80% of their tasks can be managed by that, versus actually have, that physical person knocking on doors trying to collect, money order checks or something of that nature. You can really automate a lot of this, and keep those conversations going through that conversational AI aspect. including maintenance requests, and then how do you get everyone to be on the same page with the same amount of information at the same time, and you can do that through that conversational AI, piece.
And when you got started with this, what tools were you originally using back in, early 2020s at this point? It's weird to say early 2020s, by the way.
Yeah, I know it is kind of weird. It wasn't widely known, and it really wasn't widely available. There was no, maybe there was Chat GPT. I don't think there was at that point, and if it was, then it wasn't widely known. We started with agency like firms, and so it really started with how do you how do you use programmatic advertising, and that kind of spurred into, hey, there's this small company that's starting to work on this conversational AI piece, but no one really knows what it is, and it wasn't sophisticated enough to be on a platform like HubSpot or something to that effect that looks like HubSpot essentially. Um, and so we've reached out to them, kind of worked with them directly on, hey, if we can build out this tech together, then we can, you guys have the platform, that look alike of HubSpot, when it comes to just the user friendliness of it, and we have the code for the conversational piece. And so, if we team up here, then I don't have to build out a platform. And frankly, I didn't want to or had the time to do that. And, vice versa. They wanted to use the tech without having to build that out, even though they had the platform. Uh, and so, yeah, we entered into agreement. We don't talk about the company. They'd expanded significantly at this point. And then we branched off and started building our own tech, our own platform at this point now, um, to where it runs, just like I was telling you.
Interesting. So my question for that is, you told me before we started getting on the actual recording that you have you work you've had that law firm, and it was at about 50 people. Where are you at now with the amount of employees, and how practically did you go from where you were to where you're at now by utilizing the different AI tools and things that you've built out internally? Because I find that very intriguing that you're like basically building your own tech.
Yeah. Yeah. The tech that's built is to fill a specific task or role, right? And so it's not so much to replace people, but it is to offer those efficiencies. Our task is to find the inefficiencies and then insert, the technology to fill that gap. And so, I mean, we really scaled down. We were close to about 50, like you were saying, and we've scaled to 7. Now, in the midst of that, we did sell off offices and things of that nature. So that did play a little bit of a role to it. But predominantly, it came with, we didn't need sales reps because this took over the sales cycle. We didn't need someone in marketing to follow up with, how are these advertisements going, or is there good ROI? Are we hitting the metrics that we need to hit between impressions and actual clicks, and then actual conversions from those clicks, and going down the funnel? We could build something that did it for us, and then it's just looking at a report and essentially color coding the report to ensure if it is outside of our metrics that it stands out to us, just so we don't get complacent.
Okay, so that gives a good picture of it. So basically, sales, marketing. I do feel like that's a common thing people are saying that might end up going away. So good thing to note here. But how did you? I mean, did you do this yourself? Did you bring in tech people to help you with this? Like, what did you do from that standpoint?
Yeah. Yeah. So I really did start this myself. That's nothing is ever done by one person. I think there's always a team. There's always mentors. At the time, I had a CMO who was pushing really hard on companies like Go High Level is a good example. They're well known in this space, who utilize conversational AI and that type of technology. And so, he was suggesting that avenue. We were trying to figure out the most cost effective way to do it. And frankly, to understand how this is built and how it works, you have to have some kind of coding background or be willing to learn the different types of code. And so I really did. I went to a library, bought up a ton of of different coding books, as silly as it sounds. I mean, even starting with like, Python for dummies type stuff, just to really understand the basics. And then as you understand those, scaling and buying more sophisticated materials so that you can understand really how this operates. And they all, all different types of code, whether it's C++ or Python or, the 100 others, really, there's not a ton of differences. Yes, I understand there are differences in how they operate, how they're built out, but from a functionality standpoint and kind of how the code is read, it really is not that different. And so if you have a good kind of baseline knowledge, you can really expand on this. And so that's how I got started. Started playing little games and building little games just to kind of test it out, and then from there, as we got into a much more sophisticated model in what we were building, if we found any kind of errors or we were having some kind of problem where it just wasn't processing the way that we needed it to, if we understood where that problem was, then we could easily go and hire contractors to help solve that problem. And we were very specific as to, this is the 4 lines of code out of, the 20,000 lines of code that are the problem. I can't figure it out. Help me solve this. And, we've used companies in the past, like Upwork is an example of that, where you can hire contractors to help you solve those kind of specific niche problems.
So my original or my first thought on that is that, wow, that's very impressive that you basically learned this type of stuff yourself. How long did it take for you to go from learning to implementation inside of your business that saw practical results?
It's a little different for me. It's a little different for me because it's a little easier in the sense of that I own the companies. And so yes, I answer to, those people that I employ, and I've got, responsibilities to take care of. But at the end of the day, nobody could really say, hey, stop doing that. Or, so I had a little bit more runway to make mistakes and live with those mistakes if I could. So, from beginning to first round of implementation, probably took about, frankly, probably took about 6 months. It probably went live 3 months in, but at a very, very small scale where we're really just testing it, breaking it. A big part of what we do is, work it till you break it so that we can then figure out how to not break it that way again. The best part about kind of unleashing it is, it's going to break at some point. Something's going to get tripped up. Let's try to do it on the front end with beta testing versus, just blindly trusting something and hoping that it all works out.
Yeah, I think beta testing for all this type of stuff is really important, especially when it's integral to your kind of like work processes. So it seems like you've been dabbling in a lot of different areas. Like you had the marketing agency. It seems like you exited from a lot of different things. I want to dive into almost the personal freedom that you seem to have, well, from my perception, probably gotten a little bit more of with what you're doing. As you've grown these systems out, how have you felt from a practical standpoint in your own business that you have either better freedom because there's like less overhead of employees, or just freedom in the ability to know that processes that are automated, for all intents and purposes, if they are set up correctly, don't make mistakes in comparison to employees and that kind of stuff? Could you talk a little bit from a business owner perspective of how that's kind of impacted you over the last couple of years?
Yeah, I mean, the whole purpose of technology is really to solve these inefficiencies. And so, I'm constantly on the lookout for some kind of inefficiency. There's never a perfect model. There's never a perfect company. There's always going to be kind of opportunity loss. And so, my task is to find it and see if we can actually address it and hopefully solve it, to minimize as many inefficiencies as we can. The freedom of scaling these companies and exiting, a few is that you learn more every time, right? And so what you think was a genius idea, when you hand off that company, if the the person who's purchasing that can't comprehend it or needs your level of understanding to operate it, you're not really out. You're still working in that company, that business. And so this was, created, drafted, and implemented in a way that got me out of it. And if I could get, our receptionists and, our legal assistants and paralegals and attorneys, if I could get them to understand it and use it daily and comprehend not only what they were doing, but then how to address any kind of issue that may pop up, then I knew that this was scalable. Because at that point, it's like, all right, we have individuals from all sorts of different demographics, education, all of that, who are all using this on a daily basis, and they're not getting tripped up with the same issue. Whether it be our AI, booking things in the calendar and making sure that it doesn't overbook us, deleting things, making sure that it still opens up for someone else to fill in. Even on the marketing side, when it comes to DSPs, and I don't know how much you want me to get into all that stuff, but when it comes to landing on websites and being able to capture the data to reserve and target on ads, which people are most familiar with as a stereotypical example, would be like Facebook. You Google something and all of a sudden you go to Facebook and then you see or Meta, and you see all the ads for the thing you were. A lot of it's just the retargeting through DSPs. But anyways, the issue that we would have is, you don't, if somebody says, I'm not interested in your services, don't text or email or whatever, unsubscribe, you don't want that software to then ignore that and then just keep serving ads. Cause then all of a sudden you're just
spamming them. Yeah.
Yeah. You're just spamming, you're killing your email rate anyways, and getting blacklisted on that. But, so there were difficulties and problems that we had to address and solve, and we had to solve them pretty quick because, the last thing you want to do is get the reputation that, hey, these guys are serving me ads and I don't want them to, and they won't stop. And so, that was early on a problem that we ran into, which was, when you find these kind of issues within the workflow, how do you address them? Well, first, how do you find it quickly enough to where you're not spending a couple weeks in the meantime, kind of ruining your brand? But then how do you address it and fix it as fast as possible without, or not without, but with the least amount of friction on the back end as you're trying to solve it?
What was that adoption like when it came to the people on your team learning and understanding how the things that you were building actually worked in order for you to not be in it? Because I understand that completely. I'm definitely at an earlier stage in what I do than you. And a lot of the, I guess, going from building these nice automations and stuff and it being off of my plate completely is that understanding of the people who work for me piece. What was that like?
So, I was fortunate. I have a team that has been with me for a while, a couple, years. And, there was an immediate buy-in, but there was a buy-in because we had the conversation of what I was trying to solve. And so, these were problems that each of them were running into on their own, and there's just not enough time in the day to go through all of these. And so, when I explained that, I'm going to build out, these models that are going to solve these specific problems to help you do your job more efficiently, not to replace you. That's not the intent at all. The intent is to, help you at your job complete tasks that may have taken you 2 or 3 hours are now taking you 15 minutes. And that frees you up to, do other things that are more important, or to scale within our company and learn new roles. And, if you, for instance, start, as a receptionist and you want to become a paralegal, you have to have that exposure to more material. From a property management standpoint, it's the same ordeal, right? If you want to go from property manager to regional, manager to nationwide, which is where we're scaling, you have to have that experience, but you have to have the time available to understand not only what the problems and efficiencies are, but then how to solve it. And then if you can't solve it, how to bring it to the attention of everybody so that we can collectively come together and say, hey, this isn't working for these reasons. does anyone know how we could fix this? And then it's just, I call them whiteboard games where, we just literally have a whiteboard in the office and we just, write on there the problems that we're having. And it could be as silly as, AI answers the phone in one ring, and I'd prefer it in two rings. That way, if I want to answer, I can answer and talk with a client. And we've had that problem in the past where it's like, hey, it's so efficient and so effective that like it feels like nothing's happening. It feels like we're not getting. Yeah, then you look at the system and you're like, oh no, we've got 100 phone calls and maybe 60 or 70 text messages, and it's doing what it's doing. It's fine, but it makes you feel weird because you're just not accustomed to it yet. And so having that open dialogue and the buy-in, I mean, that was the biggest thing. Is I had to have the buy-in so that people weren't upset when it didn't work, if it broke or if there was a problem. There's no time to be upset about, hey, I wish we didn't do this because I'd prefer to do it. You're either in or you're out. What was it? Uh, that movie with Dwayne Johnson and I can't remember the other guy's name.
Kevin Hart, maybe.
In or you're out. You can't be out. And they're like, well, I'm already in. they you do it was Central Intelligence. That was
It's Central Intelligence is the movie where he's the CIA guy. Yeah,
Kevin Hart. That's what it was.
yeah, yeah. I like that. So I really like hearing how this has kind of impacted you. It's almost like it's like an like you're so like what the heck is actually happening in the background. You get so it feels like it's its own living being, which is pretty cool. What now with what you're doing? I guess just to make a little bit of a shift to what you're actively doing now at Wise Capital. How are you doing the same process again? And what cool things are you implementing at Wise Capital to kind of save you this type of time and whatnot?
Yeah. So, at Wise Capital, we're a property tech company. So we're heavily involved on the tech side of things. So just from a 30,000 point view, we've built out tools that are, machine learned tools, maintenance predictive models, where we can get within a 3% margin of error with those IoT sensors. We're also in the process of making our own IoT sensors, our own locks. We have our own IoT network, conversational AI. We're working right now with different manufacturers as we try to implement things that just don't exist in the Class C space. And so that's where we live and operate in, is we look for Class C multifamily value add properties. We have a fund that we raise money, investors invest with us. We purchase these multifamily apartments, and then we implement our tech, stabilize, and then exit. And so what we're focused on is, how do we implement the technology in this space, in the Class C space, that best benefits the tenant, and bringing or rising or raising the quality of life of a group of individuals who typically aren't where people start with this kind of technology. Typically, it's luxury Class A that kind of gets all the cool little gadgets. And our philosophy is, if we can build those same processes and gadgets and all the cool stuff at a price that works in the Class C space, then we can build it anywhere. And that's the catch on a lot of these technologies that exist right now. Even smart locks. I mean, some of these smart locks go for between $900 and $1,200 a lock. That's wild in the Class C space, where just the math doesn't work out. It just is not something that you can get an ROI on. But we can develop locks, in my personal opinion, that are better than the smart locks that exist now for $40, and we can mass produce them through manufacturing for $17. Well, if that's the case, then you really can scale at a group, or with apartments that otherwise wouldn't have that capability, because it just is a space that is often left behind, frankly.
You're at 7 employees, you said, at this company?
Yep. Yeah. Mhm.
Practically speaking, say, for example, you were doing things manually or didn't have these types of systems set up, would you have a guesstimate as to what you would have to have staff-wise in order to fulfill what you're doing now?
Oh, I mean, I think that it would be well over 50. I mean, when you look at the, you know, at the complications from even a maintenance predictive type model, right? Where we're trying to evaluate how long of a life we have left with, HVACs and fridges and water heaters and maybe boilers, and the list goes on and on and on. That's tough to do with just one maintenance guy, just because it's like being the jack of all trades. You can know a little bit, but it's tough to really know everything. When you look at even the evaluating of these properties, when we look, we buy things off market. We don't go to the public market. We're trying to capture these off market. We have to evaluate these deals, and there are, just in our city, there's tens of thousands of these type of deals. I mean, if one person was doing that, I mean, there would be years to evaluate, and then it wouldn't be even valuable, because at that point, by the time you got through one or two properties, everything else is wrong and changed, and and so it becomes a problem of having accurate data at that point. And
Yeah, maybe speak to that a little bit more. Like, how does this come back to your your customer, like, right? Because I obviously that's something that everybody cares about. How does that come back to the people that you work with?
It's fortunate because as we develop these, we're able to keep, let's use the tenants as an example. We're able to keep rents within a marketable rate, which the second you start to implement a lot of these technologies, especially the ones that don't typically exist in this space, that comes at a high price. And typically if history teaches us anything, then what it says is, oh, you're going to raise rent so much to cover for all the money that you're spending on all the renovations and amenities and all this kind of stuff. And if you're able to build these technologies at a price that is something that can fit in this space, in this class C space, then you're not increasing rents to, the great example is there's luxury class A apartments here locally in Louisville that will go, two bed, one bath will go for 2,600 a month to 2,800 a month. I mean, that's really tough on working class families that can't afford that. And so if you get into a class C space and maybe the rent's, 1,300, and you're able to capture on this technology that doesn't exist in the class A space even at this point, then not only are you getting a better quality of life, and we focus heavily on tenant interactions and making sure that what we're doing is community based. There's no point in adding all this tech if it isn't worth using, or if it is broken, and you kill the brand at that point. So we're hyper aware of how involved we have to be within the community to make sure that it's not just my wild idea that getting smart glass for the windows is going to look so cool if at the end of the day you go to the tenants and they're like, I don't even know how to do that, or what is that. You gotta, there's a learning curve there, but there's a lot of exciting things happening specifically because of technology and AI, and being able to evaluate these deals and cost effective of methods to implement and even build that we just wouldn't have. Frankly, this it would take me 15 years to get to where I am. Just to afford the amount of people that I would need to have to build this.
Okay, wow, yeah, no, I guess some people probably wouldn't have considered, how that comes back to the tenants, right? Yeah, I guess my initial thought wouldn't have been something to that effect, but that's a good point. I now getting into a little bit more of the, I guess, hot button AI topics that are going on, right? My initial thought when I see, some people would see what you did with the 50-person company that moved down to like 7, and they would have a critique of how that impacted jobs and whatnot. What would be your pushback to something like that if someone were to come to you and say, well, obviously jobs are going to get reduced by AI, and in regards to like, oh, it's going to have a net negative effect on everybody?
Well, I think there's a lot of business lessons in that, right? I mean, when I first started my first company with the law firm, I had always imagined, successful law firms have 100 or 200 or plus attorneys, and they're these massive, um, massive businesses that can handle so many clients, and you have to have that, or else you're not really successful. And so you get in this trap of, I need more people so that it's, I sound more sophisticated or further along than the others that are competing with me, or I'm competing with them. And then what you find is that, you're hiring people to hire people. And that's probably one of the first business lessons is, you know, it's great to say that you have, 50 or 60 or 100 employees, but if you only needed 20, really all you're doing is putting something on a resume to brag about. And so I think what the technology did for us was it really put a light on, what is it that we're doing? Like what is this person's role? What are they accomplishing? Can we use them somewhere else? And a lot of times, what we found is maybe we were getting 10 to 15% effort out of individuals because they didn't have the work. We had more people than what we really needed. And so, there's that business lesson of, hey, a lot of this, and especially the scaling down, has to do with getting rid of some offices. And so that played a little bit of a role in the numbers. But then also, you know, what tasks are we actually trying to complete here? And what are these employees actually tasked to complete? And if the answer is, well, they just answer the phone when the phone rings, well, if you create technology that pulls, the calls, so there's no phone, then you're like, hey, there's no phone. And so, yeah, I'd say when it comes to people who got, quote unquote, which is always the critique and the scare factor of like, I was replaced by AI. You know, I, I don't think that's true. I think, what happened was we found the inefficiencies, and we found that we had more staff than what we really needed. And then we were able to evaluate that. And when it comes to scaling in today's age, I think it is, it's the starting point now. It is, how can I do this the cheapest way possible? And a lot of times it's through technology. Just, $350 a month in a subscription is a heck of a lot cheaper than going to, hire somebody with a salary or even hourly or whatever benefits, everything else you want to talk about. But, you really have to have the need for that role. And I think that's, and rightfully so. I mean, I think we hear these, we see these articles that have come out, even with these major companies that are laying off thousands of employees, and really they're just quasi kind of pointing at AI and blaming AI or any kind of automation, saying, "Hey, we found a cheaper way to do it." And I think what the real answer is, they finally had a reason to look into the workforce and say, "We have all these employees. What are they doing? Are
Yeah,
they
exactly.
as they need to be? Is this helping them, or are we really finding out that?" I mean, I remember reading a story where there was an employee who hadn't showed up to work in 3 months, and no one knew because they just all went off. So they got paid for 3 months, didn't go to work. And I think this technology is now kind of putting a light on that, and because of it, it's harder to hide, kind of what you're really working on, because of the sophistication that we're building through these technologies. I don't think that. I'm sure there's an example somewhere where technology replaced people, and I think the easiest example of that might be maybe the automotive industries, where we're seeing robots kind of implement this. And I think it's going to happen. I don't think there's a way to, um, not have that happen. The difference will be, we need people to work on the automation. We need people to work on, the robots, or any kind of mechanics that are doing that in the auto space. Um, and so it just shifts what the workforce is. But we've gone through these shifts multiple times just in our history. I mean, look at the industrial time. And I mean, you went from an agricultural workforce into, an actual, industrial workforce. People had to shift. And we're going through that next wave, in my opinion, of a shift that people are going to have to address, and figure out if it's a space they want to be in or not.
Well, I guess speak to that a little bit more, because I am genuinely curious of your perspective on it. I have this theory going that, well, I mean, it seems like you might have already proven it out for all intents and purposes. One task jobs and associate level jobs. I mean, you ran a marketing agency, so you literally proved this out. Like associate level jobs, I don't from in knowledge work, I don't actually think will exist in 5 years. I think they'll push towards basically the quote manager role, who has the ability to quality assure some of this work will be there, and maybe they'll have to do some minor tweaks. But the fact of the matter is, I believe if there is if then logic and basic click clack, the only gap that needs to be bridged now is agentic AI's ability to interact with an interface, or the APIs to be expanded. It's actually not even the AI's thought process right now.
Yeah, I mean, I I guess, when I look at kind of what you're referencing in the sense of, you get rid of that associate role, it's more in the manager role. I mean, we can argue that at a certain point, even the manager role kind of gets replaced.
Yeah, QA work. Yeah,
Yeah, it just,
you just have an agent like QA the work for all intents and purposes. Yeah.
right. Yeah. I mean, you know, I used to say this back when I was more involved in the marketing and sales side is, one of the toughest things to do is, have that marketing and sales agency, because typically the first thing that gets cut in a business is marketing and sales. So if they're using some kind of agency or third party, that tends to be the first place they go to when, revenue takes a hit for whatever reason. They go to the marketing and sales agency and say, yeah, this is too expensive, I'm not getting the return. And that's really not true. It's just, there's other factors that play a role. And it's always difficult for me to go into a small business and try to convince them that they need to be marketing when they've been around for 20 years and it's all been word of mouth and they've never marketed before. And, it's always a surprise to me the percentage of companies that really don't want to scale, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's fine. But I was never truly aware of that until that time where I realized, a vast majority of these small businesses, they want to have a great, lifestyle. They want to make enough money to pay for the things they want to do, but they have no intent of being, with 200 offices or in 50 states, or, that's not why they started their company. That's not why they're doing what they do. And so because of it, there is that learning curve. And as automation and AI kind of take over on that side, what we'll find is that, people, in my opinion, whether it's right or wrong, they need someone to build a relationship and trust with. And that's extremely difficult to do with any kind of automation or software. And so, I can give you all the numbers, every day and show how great this is working. But at the end of the day, if I don't have any connection with you, I'm just going to look for the next cheapest route that offers the same thing, in my opinion. And so we're always going to need people to build those relationships, to maintain those relationships, to make sure that the automation is not only working, but is something that we can scale to whatever that client is looking to achieve. And it may not be to double or triple or whatever revenue. It may just be to keep status quo, and that they need to adapt from the traditional marketing models, whether that be through Microsoft or Google or whoever. Uh, but they don't know what they don't know, and it's not their space. And so, that's not their intent to learn all of this stuff. And in that particular space, that's our role. That's our role, is to fill that gap and to teach what we can, and then to explain in the easiest sense possible how it works. Uh, and I think that that's really where the marketing and sales agencies are going to be led, is same concept. They're going to be assessing, how many employees we have, what are their actual roles and tasks that they're accomplishing, and why do we need them? And then, can those jobs be done more efficiently with technology and AI? And then from there, do we still need that role? And so I think you're going to see some scale back on that side of things. And I know, we're kind of in the ebb of that space right now. And it's very interesting to see, because I think a lot of them are assessing this, and they're going, "Oh, okay, we now have this technology that generates these ads in a second, and they could generate 20 of them in a second. And then I'm able to look at it and see what, fits my needs, and whether or not I, want to change something, maybe significant or maybe not so much." And that happens, in an instant, versus, the traditional model, which really was just like 3 years ago, where we're sitting there going, it really wasn't that long, where we're sitting there and we're like, okay, well, here are their colors, and this is what they have to do from a compliance standpoint, and this is how we can draw attention from social media ads, or maybe the more traditional side if you're doing CTV or OTT or whatever, and assessing it that way, which takes time. And you're seeing, the contracts are, 3 to 6 month contracts, because it takes time to build that out. And now we're seeing contracts that are like 4 to 6 weeks, and they're almost tripling the outcome of what they can produce, because of all the technology that we now have and are implementing into the businesses. And so, I think that for the companies that want to scale, and especially in that space, it's very easy to um, look at what's available, assess how that solves an inefficiency in your business, regardless of whether it's marketing, sales, law firm, I don't care, any industry, doesn't matter. And then try to implement this to solve those inefficiencies.
Well, I think you really navigated that well, because you kind of approached it from the business owner perspective, but I also think you pointed to something that is kind of difficult for a lot of people to admit. But I remember being at a job recently, prior to like starting this whole thing a couple of years ago, and when you're at a job where you don't feel like your skills are being used, like that's actually not really good for anybody. So if somebody's like doing 15% of what they could be doing, sure, it is very unfortunate from the financial standpoint, but I think we're going to see a lot of innovation from everybody's capabilities. Like everyone is going to reach a height level that I believe is higher, because it's going to kind of be forced by society's adjustment to these agents that are able to do these basic tasks, which quite frankly, we're better than as people, like we're better than just picking up a phone. We're better than just doing some basic click, click, click here on a screen. And I think that Steve Jobs' prediction that a computer would be a bicycle for the mind ended up missing the part where a robot would get on the bike. But he was sort of prophetic, just missed he was early and late. I think just to close things out as we're hitting the top of the hour, my last question would be, for what you're doing, what would you like everyone to take out of what you've said? And then what would you like to plug to end the episode so that people can make sure that they check you out?
Yeah, again, thank you for having me on here. I really appreciate it. Obviously with Wise Capital as a property tech company, and we're looking into the Class C space and developing these technologies to improve, our tenants' lives and the community around them. Uh, you know, we're developing technology that at a certain point exists, and that, to your point, it's fascinating, because with the capabilities and technologies that we have at our fingertips now, even the free versions, I mean, you're able to just be a kid again, right? And
It's like a video game, yeah.
yeah, I mean, you can ask these kind of silly questions to this technology, like explain how this works. It's, my one of my favorite things to do is to kind of use what exists, whether it be Gemini or OpenAI, whatever, ChatGPT. Uh, as there used to be a TV show, MythBusters, and then there was another one, How It Works or something to that effect. And that was always a fun show to watch with my kids, just because we were sitting there like, how's a penny made? It's like I don't know, and we're watching these, and now you just hop on there and it's going to walk you through not only how it's made, but like how it's sourced, and then how, and all of this information that, yeah, you could Google, or search engine, whatever search engine you wanted to say, but you don't get that sophisticated of an answer. And my other fun thing to do in that space is to always challenge it and say, well, show me the rule. Because every now and then you'll have the AI like, oh, you're right. Sorry. Nope. You can do whatever. Like, okay. So you are wrong periodically. But
Appreciate it's something I really appreciate about AI is that it's like, oh yeah, my bad.
yeah, it's like it's talking to a buddy. You're just like, hey, I don't think that's right, and they're like, oh yeah, you're right. Definitely wrong. Try not to tell everybody. Yeah. So I mean, I think for us, obviously, you can reach us through investwisecap.com or on social media, particularly like LinkedIn, Instagram, Meta, all that good stuff. Very active on the LinkedIn space and becoming more active on the YouTube space. But for anyone who's trying to reach out, that's the best way to reach out is through our website or just through direct contact through LinkedIn, or you can email us at wise@investwisecap.com. Um, but yeah, that's the space that we're in. We're the property tech industry is a $36 billion industry as it stands today. It's projected to go to 88 billion in the next 7 years. This tech is coming, and I think when it gets implemented at all these different levels between, C class, multifamily to luxury A, it's going to feel like it happened overnight. And the reality is, this has been kind of a 20-year journey for the industry itself. But I mean, just back up 3 years, no one was talking about property tech. I mean, nobody knew what the heck that was. Now we're talking about, you know, pushing a button on your phone and your windows blacking out, so you don't have to install blinds traditionally, or, there's now tinted windows that you can move and it works like transition glasses on, if you're wearing any kind of glasses or sunglasses. We have outlets that are on rollers that move. So if the outlet is not in the space that you can reach, you can actually move it 3 feet over. It's going to feel like all this stuff just got dropped on us out of nowhere. And the reality is this thing has been in development for years. Um, and so it's going to be a very interesting time. I don't think that the next 5 years is going to look anything like it does today. I just don't, especially in the property tech space. There's a tremendous amount of inefficiencies and not a lot of people to that are involved in trying to solve those. And so it's a very interesting time for sure. I really appreciate the time and you having me on here today.
Of course, man. I really appreciate it, Chris. And it was a pleasure chatting with you. We're really excited. Please make sure to go to investwisecap.com and we'll see you guys in the next one. Thanks.